Everybody, this is Dream, and we have a pretty big slate here on FanDuel. Now, there is a difference between the FanDuel slate and the DraftKings slate. On FanDuel, we include the Dallas-Orlando game, which starts at 5:30. That game was moved up due to the hurricane in Florida, and so FanDuel has decided to include it on the slate. So that's gonna make it a little bit more difficult just because of that situation. My plan is if I want to use any player from that team, those teams, then I'm gonna put them in the lineup and then keep everybody blank until about an hour before the 7 o'clock games start, and then build my lineup from there. Because I don't even think that they're other than like maybe Doncic. There's probably not much that I even want to use in that game anyway. So that's kind of my plan today. This is some strategy idea. With that said, though, can you guys like, comment, and subscribe? I really appreciate it. Let's get into the injury report. The Pacers, Duarte is out for the Hornets. Hayward is out for the Jazz. Vanderbilt is questionable for the Hawks. Young is questionable for the Knicks. Robinson is out for the Nets. Irving is out for the Rockets. Fernando and Tater out. Siakam is out for the Raptors. Pelicans. The Nance is questionable for the Bulls. Drummond is questionable, and White is out for the Suns. Cam Johnson's out. Chris Paul is questionable for the Bucks. Holiday is doubtful for the Thunder. Pokovitsky is questionable for the Grizzlies. Adams is questionable for the Spurs. Collins is out. McDermott is questionable for the Lakers. LeBron and Davis are probable. Walker is questionable. For the Clippers, Leonard is out, and then for the Kings, Malik Monk is questionable. So we got a lot of injuries today. At least some of them are gonna definitely be impactful later on in the day and figuring out who is end up gonna be playing. Especially Drew Holiday, I think is a big issue here. But overall, this slate is pretty interesting. Lots of games. Not my favorite slate by any stretch. The way the games are laid out and stuff like that. But it's one of the better slates we've had in the last few weeks. As you know, the last week it seemed like every slate was just a mountain of injuries, and having no games yesterday is kind of helping a little bit. But we still have some pretty big injury news with Trae Young potentially being out again and Drew Holiday sitting out. So we do have some options, obviously there, but it's an interesting slate anyhow. So let's go ahead and get into the guards first. So for the point guards, I really like John Wall today. He should be playing today, as far as we can tell, and the Lakers have been pretty terrible against guards. He does come off the bench, and he does play a little bit sporadic minutes. His price point on FanDuel is a little bit too cheap for his production, though. Plus, he does have tendency to get steals and stuff like that. And he's been getting lots of assists and scoring a pretty good amount of points. So I do like him in this matchup, especially with the Clippers still being down Kawhi Leonard. He's one of my top core plays on this particular slate on FanDuel. Then we're going to look at Terry Rozier for Charlotte. He's in a pretty interesting spot here, and he's been playing really solid in the few games he's played. His price point has come up, is pretty high though. So he's not my top option at this position, but he's still pretty good here, and he's pretty safe. Then we're going to look at Jamal Murray for Denver, and this is a nice little plus matchup for him against Indiana. His minutes are slowly kind of creeping up. Now, he does have tendency to play under 25 minutes. He has occasionally, but I do think that with this game not being on a back-to-back and being able to rest is going to help him play more minutes in this one. Plus, this is a little bit of an easier matchup than he's had throughout the season. So even though Halliburton is pretty much the star guy there, Murray will be able to play his game the way he likes, and his price point is pretty good here. If he can get over 30 minutes, he should be able to pay off quite nicely. And then Marcus Smart. I don't usually like using Marcus Smart, but his price point is still pretty good here. He's been playing a lot of minutes most of the games this season, and this is a nice plus matchup for them, and so I think he's a decent play on the slate. Then we're going to look at shooting guard here, and I've got Luka as a good option. Now, Luka, pretty much the only guy I like in the Dallas game, and he has a really high upside. He's been pretty consistent this season, scoring over 50 fantasy points every single game, and I expect him to continue that. He is absolutely just pouring points in and getting occasionally triple doubles and stuff like that. So he definitely has the capacity to pay off on this one. Then we're gonna look at Devin Booker here, who may end up being playing more point guard in this game. Now, he's been a little bit inconsistent to start the season. He's had a couple off games, but overall, he's been pretty good. And he does get a pretty good amount of peripheral stats, and with Chris Paul out, he'll even get more His price point is a little above what I'd like it to be in the matchup, but overall, matchup is really good in his favor. And if Chris Paul ends up out, he's a great play. Then we're going to look at Brandon Ingram for New Orleans. Now, this is a tough matchup against Chicago, but he's been really consistent when he's played and played full complement of minutes, and his price point's a little bit too cheap for his potential in the game. Then we're going to look at Tyrese Halliburton. Now, he has got a tough matchup against Denver. Denver's a pretty good defensive team, but he's been pretty much matchup proof throughout the season. And while his price point has come up a little bit, he's still in a pretty good option on this particular slate. Then we're going to look at Royce O'Neal here for Brooklyn. His price point is just way too cheap for what he's been doing with Kyrie Irving out. He had one little bit of off game where he just didn't shoot the ball well, but overall he's been playing solid, and I really don't see much reason why he would be a letdown in this particular slate, especially with New York's sporadic defensive situation. Then we're going to look at Giannis. Now, Giannis is probable to play, but it looks like his price point is actually pretty decent here on FanDuel because, especially if Jrue Holiday doesn't play, he'll take over with more of the offense. He's been playing really good, though, and he's had a couple off games, but I look for him to have a big game in this one. He did sit out a game a couple of days ago, and then he played about 25 minutes the last game. So I expect him to play more minutes in this one, especially in a plus matchup like this. Then we're going to look at Scotty Barnes for Toronto. He's in a really good spot here. He didn't play good in the last game against Chicago. That wasn't a back-to-back, though. His price point has come up, but he is a focal point of the offense with Siakam out, and that makes him a viable play. And then Bobby Portis here for Milwaukee. His price point is actually a little bit cheap for what he's been doing this season for the most part. He's been a little bit up and down, but he's going to get more minutes if Jrue Holiday is out, and he should be a good play on this particular slate against a weak opponent. Then we're going to look at Al Horford for Boston. Against Detroit, he should be able to dominate, and really in the last few games, he really started to come into his own this season. It took him a few games to get going, but he's now playing a full complement of minutes, and he's been playing well, and his price point still hasn't really reflected that, so I do like him in this matchup. Then we're going to look at Isaiah Hartenstein. Now, the issue with Isaiah is that sometimes the last game, he looked really good, but he didn't start because the Knicks are freaking nuts with their lineup situations and stuff like that. You got to make sure he is going to start, but if he does start, he's a really good option at this price point. So you just have to check in on that one closer to the lock. Zion Williamson looks pretty interesting today. The catch with him is that sometimes he gets hurt during the game, and so that he doesn't play as much. But overall, if he plays a full complement of minutes, he will easily pay off at this price point. Then we got Miles Turner for Indiana here. His price point's a little bit too cheap for his potential, though he has been inconsistent so far in the games he has played. But if he does play over 35 minutes, he definitely has a ton of upside as a result. Then we're going to find DeAndre Ayton here. Now, Ayton's been an enigma this season. He sometimes he's been getting hurt during games, just kind of like Zion has, and that's been hurting his fantasy potential. His price point is come down some, but if Chris Paul doesn't play, he will gain a lot of offensive responsibilities. And then finally, last but not least, Julius Randle here for the Knicks at $7,200. This is too cheap for what he's been doing with Mitchell Robinson out. He becomes even more focal point of the offense with Robinson out, and he's going to get more rebounds on average too in that kind of situation. And I really like this matchup for him against Brooklyn, who hasn't been good against power forwards and stuff. So I think he's a great play on this particular slate. With that said, guys, I thank you guys for liking, commenting, and subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below, and have a nice day, guys.